The pen hadn't even finished touching the paper when Jessica smiled. Not the kind of smile you'd expect from someone ending a 7-year marriage, but the relieved grin of someone finally free from a burden. She slid the divorce papers across our kitchen table like she was returning a library book, casual and detached. There she said, checking her phone immediately after. Marcus is picking me up in 20 minutes. We're flying to Aspen for the weekend. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at the papers, my signature still wet on documents that dissolved everything we'd built together. 7 years of marriage gone with the stroke of a pen. What hurt most wasn't the divorce itself, but how effortlessly she'd signed away our life together like it meant nothing at all. The morning had started like any other Thursday in our Lakewood home, except for the manila envelope sitting on our breakfast counter. Jessica had placed it there deliberately, right next to my coffee mug, impossible to miss. When I opened it and saw the divorce papers already filled out with her lawyer's letterhead, my heart dropped to my stomach. She'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months, and I was the last to know. Jessica, what is this? I'd asked, holding up the documents with trembling hands. She was already dressed for work in her sharp business suit, the kind that costs more than most people make in a week. Her dark hair was pulled back in that perfect bun she wore to important meetings. She was applying lipstick in the hallway mirror like nothing unusual was happening. Exactly what it looks like, Ryan. Her voice carried that cold, professional tone she used with difficult clients at Peak Marketing Solutions. I've thought about this for a long time. We both know this marriage isn't working anymore. She turned to face me, and I saw nothing in her eyes. No sadness, no regret, just impatience to get this conversation over with. We haven't even talked about counseling, I said desperately. We could work on this together. Remember when we used to talk about everything? Remember our plans? Jessica let out a short laugh that felt like a slap. Ryan, be realistic. Look at yourself. Look at where you are in life. Your family's construction business is hemorrhaging money. You're living off my salary. You spend your evenings volunteering at that community center instead of networking or building something meaningful. I need a partner who matches my ambition, not someone who's content with mediocrity. The words stung because they contained enough truth to hurt. Mitchell & Sons construction was struggling badly. The pandemic had destroyed half our contracts. Supply costs had skyrocketed. We were 3 months behind on equipment payments. My dad, David, had built that company from nothing 40 years ago, and watching it crumble was killing him. Mom, Linda, had already taken a part-time job at the grocery store to help with their mortgage. Jessica was right about me living off her salary, but it wasn't by choice. I'd been working 16-hour days trying to save the family business while she climbed the corporate ladder. Well, since when did providing for my family become mediocrity? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Since when did loyalty and hard work become character flaws? Since they stopped paying the bills? Jessica replied sharply. Marcus offered me a partnership in his consulting firm. We're expanding to 3 new cities, and I'll be heading the Denver operations. This is a chance to build something real, Ryan. Something bigger than babysitting a dying construction company. Marcus. Of course, this came back to Marcus Webb, her business partner at Peak Marketing. I'd met him several times at Jessica's work events. A smooth-talking guy in expensive suits who drove a Tesla and name-dropped clients like they were personal friends. He was everything Jessica admired. Successful, wealthy, connected, and completely ruthless when it came to getting what he wanted. How long has this been going on with Marcus? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Oh, Jessica paused her lipstick application for just a moment. It's not what you think. Marcus and I have a professional relationship that could become something more, but only after we handle this situation properly. I'm not a cheater, Ryan. I'm just someone who knows when to move forward. The clinical way she described ending. Our marriage as handling this situation felt worse than if she'd just admitted to an affair. At least passion would have been understandable. This cold calculation, this complete dismissal of everything we'd shared, was devastating. I thought about our wedding day 7 years ago in Boulder, where we'd both grown up. Jessica had been radiant in her white dress, spinning in the mountain meadow we'd chosen for our ceremony. She'd grabbed my hands and said, "Ryan Mitchell, you're going to be stuck with me forever. Think you can handle that?" I'd kissed her and promised that forever sounded perfect. Now, staring at these divorce papers, I wondered when exactly forever had become a burden to her. "What about your parents?" I asked, grasping for anything that might make her reconsider. "Robert and Patricia love me like a son." "What about all the family dinners, all the holidays we've shared?" "My parents understand that sometimes people grow apart," Jessica said, though I caught the slightest hesitation in her voice. "They want me to be happy, and this marriage isn't making me happy anymore."
Dad.
The truth was, Jessica's parents had always treated me well, but they'd also never hidden their concerns about their daughter marrying into a blue-collar family. Robert owned 3 successful car dealerships across Colorado, and Patricia sat on the boards of half the charities in Cherry Hills. They loved Jessica fiercely and wanted the best for her, which in their minds meant someone who could match their social status and financial success. I signed the papers because I realized that fighting for someone who didn't want to be fought for was pointless. Jessica had already mentally moved on months ago. While I'd been working late trying to save contracts and keep employees paid, she'd been planning her exit strategy with Marcus. Marriage hadn't ended when she signed those papers this morning. It had ended gradually, meeting by meeting, business trip by business trip, as she built a life that had no room for me in it. After she left for the airport with Marcus, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at my copy of the divorce decree. The house felt enormous and empty, filled with the ghosts of conversations we'd never have and plans we'd never fulfill. I thought about calling my friend Tyler, but I couldn't bear the idea of explaining how completely I'd failed to see this coming. Instead, I drove to the community center where I volunteered twice a week teaching basic construction skills to teenagers. It wasn't much, but it felt good to build something with my hands, to teach kids that they could create things that mattered. Jessica had never understood why I spent my free time there instead of networking at country club events. But those kids reminded me why I loved construction in the first place. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed a familiar car and realized that Emma, Jessica's younger sister, was probably inside teaching her literacy class. Emma had always been different from Jessica, choosing social work over business, volunteering over networking, and genuine kindness over strategic relationships. She'd been working with disadvantaged kids for years, making a real difference in their lives even though it would never make her wealthy. I hadn't seen Emma much since she'd moved back to Denver 6 months ago. Jessica rarely mentioned her sister, and when she did, there was always an undercurrent of frustration that Emma wasn't living up to the family's expectations. But as I walked toward the community center, carrying the weight of my divorce papers in my jacket pocket, I found myself hoping I'd run into her. Emma had always been easy to talk to, and right now I needed someone who might understand that. Success couldn't be measured only in dollars and status symbols. Walking into the Rocky Mountain Community Center felt like stepping into a different world. The walls were covered with artwork from kids' classes, handwritten thank you notes, and photos from various community events. The place hummed with positive energy that stood in sharp contrast to the cold silence of my empty house. I could hear Emma's voice drifting from the literacy classroom, patient and encouraging as she worked with a student struggling through a paragraph. Emma had always possessed this natural ability to make people feel valued, even when they were at their lowest point. I remembered her from high school, 3 years younger than Jessica and me, but somehow wiser in ways that mattered. While Jessica had been student body president and prom queen, Emma had been tutoring struggling students and organizing food drives for families in need. She'd never sought the spotlight, but everyone who knew her respected her genuine compassion. After Jessica left for Stanford to study business, Emma had chosen Colorado State University for social work. Jessica used to roll her eyes when Emma would call home excited about her internships at homeless shelters or her work with at-risk youth. She could be making 6 figures in corporate consulting, Jessica would say, but instead she's wasting her intelligence on people who'll never appreciate it. I never agreed with that assessment, but back then I was too focused on impressing Jessica to speak up for her sister. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Jessica was flying to Aspen with Marcus, planning her lucrative new business venture, Emma was here on a Thursday evening helping kids learn to read. Both sisters were intelligent and capable, but they'd chosen completely different definitions of success. I found myself thinking about the last family gathering at Robert and Patricia's house in Cherry Hills 3 months ago. It had been Patricia's birthday dinner, and the whole extended family was there. Jessica had spent most of the evening on her phone, fielding calls about some major client presentation. Emma had been helping Patricia in the kitchen and playing board games with the younger cousins. When Robert asked about Jessica's work, she'd launched into a detailed explanation of her marketing strategies and projected revenue growth. When he asked Emma about her job, she'd simply said she was helping a teenage mother get her GED and seemed genuinely excited about the girl's progress. That night driving home, Jessica had been frustrated. "Emma makes me look bad," she'd complained. "Mom and Dad ask her these softball questions about her little charity work, but they grill me about quarterly projections and market expansion. It's like they expect more from me because I'm actually building something substantial." I'd tried to suggest that maybe Emma's work was substantial too, just in a different way, but Jessica had dismissed the idea. "Ryan, being kind is easy. Building wealth and creating jobs and making a real impact in the economy, that's hard. That's what matters in the real world." Now, standing in this community center with divorce papers in my pocket, I wondered if Jessica had ever understood what the real world actually looked like for most people. Her definition of impact had always been measured in profit margins and market share, never in the quiet victories of helping someone learn to read or teaching a kid to build something with their hands. Emma emerged from her classroom just as I was lost in these thoughts. She looked surprised to see me, but not unpleasantly so. She'd always been naturally beautiful in an understated way, with Jessica's same dark hair, but warmer brown eyes that actually focused on you when you talked. Where Jessica wore power suits and expensive jewelry, Emma dressed simply in jeans and a soft sweater that looked comfortable rather than calculated. "Ryan," she said, tilting her head with curiosity, "what brings you here tonight, don't you? Usually come on Tuesdays and Saturdays." I needed somewhere to think, I admitted, then hesitated. "Emma, did Jessica mention anything to you about us?" Her expression shifted to concern immediately. Emma had always been perceptive about people's emotions, probably from years of social work training. "She called me this afternoon," she said quietly. "She told me about the divorce papers." I felt a stab of pain that Jessica had been casual enough about our marriage ending to call her sister and chat about it like it was weather news. "What exactly did she say?" Emma looked uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to repeat something hurtful. "She said you two had grown apart and that she was ready to move on with her life. She mentioned something about a business opportunity with Marcus." She paused, studying my face. "Ryan, are you okay? You look like you've been hit by a truck." "I feel like I have been," I said honestly. "I knew we were having problems, but I thought we could work through them." I didn't realize she'd already mentally moved on months ago. Emma gestured toward a quiet corner where some comfortable chairs were arranged around a coffee table. "You want to talk about it? I mean, I know this is weird since I'm her sister, but I'm also your friend. I care about what happens to you." Sitting down across from Emma, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't been able to with anyone else. Maybe it was because she wasn't trying to offer solutions or tell me everything would be fine. She just listened as I explained how isolated I'd felt in my own marriage, how Jessica's increasing success had created a distance between us that I couldn't bridge, and how devastating it was to realize that my wife saw me as a liability rather than a partner. "I keep wondering what I could have done differently," I confessed. "Maybe if I'd been more ambitious, more focused on making money instead of trying to save my family's business. Maybe if I'd been more like Marcus." Emma shook her head firmly. "Hey, Ryan, listen to me. The problem isn't that you're not like Marcus. The problem is that Jessica forgot who she used to be. Do you remember what she was like in high school, before college changed her priorities?" I did remember. Achaia had been driven even then, but she'd also been warmer, more connected to the people around her. She used to volunteer at the animal shelter and actually enjoyed spending time with my family. She'd been proud when I'd worked construction jobs during summer breaks, saying it showed I wasn't afraid of hard work. People change, I said. Maybe she just outgrew what we had. Or maybe she got so focused on climbing ladders that she forgot why she started climbing in the first place, Emma replied. Ryan, you're one of the most decent people I know. You've been killing yourself trying to save your family's business and keep people employed. You volunteer here because you believe in giving back to the community. Those aren't character flaws, no matter what Jessica might have said. Her words were like a balm to wounds I didn't even realize were still bleeding. Jessica had spent months making me feel like my values were naive, like my commitment to family and community was somehow holding her back from achieving her potential. Having Emma remind me that those things had value too felt like being allowed to breathe again. I'm sorry she hurt you, Emma continued. I love my sister, but I've watched her become someone I barely recognize over the past few years. Success changed her, and not necessarily for the better. We talked for another hour about everything except the divorce. Emma told me about her current students, including a 16-year-old named Carlos who'd been homeless for 6 months, but was determined to finish high school. I shared stories about the kids in my construction class, how proud they were when they learned to properly use a level or built their first simple shelf. As we talked, I realized this was the kind of conversation I used to hope for with Jessica, but hadn't had in years. Emma actually listened to my stories about work instead of checking her phone. She asked follow-up questions and remembered details from previous conversations. She made me feel like what I was doing mattered, even if it wasn't making me wealthy. When it was time to leave, Emma walked me to the parking lot. Ryan, I know this is a terrible time for you, but I want you to know that ending this marriage doesn't mean you're a failure. Sometimes people just want different things from life, and that's nobody's fault. Standing beside my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine human connection. Emma had always been in Jessica's shadow, dismissed by her family as the idealistic daughter who chose purpose over profit. But talking with her tonight, I realized she possessed something Jessica had lost somewhere along her climb to success. The ability to see people as human beings rather than stepping stones or obstacles. Thank you, I said. I needed to remember that I'm not completely worthless just because my marriage failed. Emma's expression grew fierce in a way that reminded me she might look gentle, but she had steel underneath. You are absolutely not worthless, Ryan Mitchell. Don't you dare let anyone make you believe that, especially not someone who was supposed to love and support you. Driving home to my empty house, I felt lighter than I had in months. The divorce papers were still in my jacket pocket. My business was still struggling, and my future was completely uncertain. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe I was just married to someone who'd forgotten how to value the things that actually mattered. 2 weeks after signing the divorce papers, I was sitting in my lawyer's office when the real bombshell dropped out. Jessica wasn't just leaving me for a business opportunity with Marcus. She was planning to take half of everything, including forcing the sale of my family's construction company to cover what she claimed were marital debts and her investment in our shared assets. She's arguing that since she's supported the household financially during the business's struggles, she's entitled to recover her investment plus compensation for opportunity costs. My attorney Sarah Chen explained while reviewing Jessica's demands. She's also claiming that the company's current debts constitute marital liabilities that need to be settled before asset division. I stared at the legal documents spread across Sarah's desk, feeling my world collapse further. Business isn't just mine. It's been in my family for 40 years. My father built it from nothing, and we've got 12 employees, depending on those jobs. If we're forced to sell now, during the worst market conditions in a decade, everyone loses everything. I understand. The emotional significance, Sarah said gently, but legally. Anything acquired or debts incurred during the marriage could be considered marital property. Your wife's financial contributions to household expenses while the business struggled could strengthen her claim. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in Lakewood to break the news. Dad was in his workshop behind the garage, methodically sharpening tools that probably didn't need sharpening. It was his way of thinking through problems, this ritual, of maintaining equipment that had served him faithfully for decades. Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner for 3, still cooking like I was coming home every night even though I'd been married for 7 years. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, settling onto the old wooden stool where I'd spent countless hours as a kid watching him work. He looked up from the chisel he was honing, and I saw the weariness in his eyes that had been growing deeper each month as our contracts dwindled and bills piled up. "If it's about the Henderson project, I already know they're going with the outfit from Colorado Springs. 20,000 less than our bid. It's not about Henderson. It's about Jessica." I took a deep breath. She filed for divorce, and she's demanding half of everything, including forcing us to sell Mitchell & Sons to settle what she's calling marital debts. The chisel slipped from Dad's hands and clattered onto the workbench. For a moment, he looked older than his 62 years. The weight of potentially losing his life's work settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. "Son, tell me you're joking." I wish I was. Her lawyer is claiming that because she paid most of our household expenses while I was trying to keep the business afloat. She invested in the company and deserves to recover that money plus damages. Mom appeared in the workshop doorway, having heard our voices through the thin walls. Her face went pale as she processed what I'd just said. "But Ryan, this business is all we have. Your father's retirement, our mortgage, the employees' jobs. Everything depends on Mitchell & Sons staying operational." "I know, Mom. I'm going to fight this, but Jessica's playing hardball. She's got Marcus's money backing her legal team, and they're treating this like a hostile corporate takeover." Dad sat heavily on his tool chest, running calloused hands through his graying hair. 40 years, he said quietly. 40 years of building something real, something that puts food on tables and roofs over heads. And she wants to tear it apart for what? Revenge? "Not revenge," I said bitterly. "Profit. Jessica doesn't do anything unless it benefits her bottom line. She probably sees this as recouping a bad investment before moving on to bigger and better things with Marcus." The 3 of us sat in the workshop's dim light, surrounded by the tools and materials that represented for decades of honest work, and contemplated the very real possibility that it could all be gone within months. The business that had put me through college, that employed guys like Tommy Rodriguez, who had 3 kids and a mortgage, that gave purpose to Dad's daily routine, might be sacrificed to fund Jessica's new life. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found myself walking the streets of our old neighborhood in Boulder where Emma still lived in a small apartment near the university. I wasn't planning to visit her, but I needed to be somewhere that felt connected. 2 better times, 2 people who valued more than money and status. I was surprised to see lights on in what I remembered as Emma's apartment, and even more surprised when she appeared on the small balcony, as if she'd sensed my presence. "Ryan, what are you doing here at 11 o'clock? "I was just walking." I called up to her, couldn't sleep. "Come up," she said without hesitation. "I'll make some tea." Emma's apartment was everything Jessica's had never been. Warm, lived in, filled with books and plants and photos of people she cared about, rather than professional achievements. The furniture was mismatched, but comfortable, and the walls were covered with artwork from her students and thank you cards from families she'd helped. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, handing me a steaming mug. "What happened?" I told her about Jessica's legal demands, about the threat to force the sale of my family's business, about how my ex-wife was essentially holding my father's life's work hostage to fund her new venture with Marcus. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "I can't believe she would do this," Emma said finally. "I mean, I knew she'd changed, but this is vindictive on a level I didn't think she was capable of." "She's not being vindictive," I said. "That would require emotion. She's being practical. In her mind, she made an investment in our marriage that didn't pay off. So now she's liquidating assets to minimize her losses." Emma curled up in the chair across from me, her dark hair falling around her shoulders in a way that reminded me she was beautiful, though she seemed completely unaware of it. "Ryan, there has to be something we can do. Some way to fight this that doesn't destroy your family's business. Unless I can come up with enough cash to buy out her claims, I don't see how." Even if I could, it would cripple us financially. For years, I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. The worst part is knowing that she doesn't need this money. Marcus's consulting firm is worth millions. She's not doing this because she's desperate. She's doing it because she can. Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring into her tea like it might contain answers. When she looked up, there was a determination in her eyes that I'd never seen before. What if she didn't get what she wanted? What if fighting you became more trouble than it was worth? What do you mean? I mean, Jessica has always cared more about appearances and public perception than almost anything else. If her divorce became messy in public, if people in her professional circles started questioning her character, she might be willing to settle for less just to make it go away quietly. I shook my head. Emma, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not going to drag this through the media or try to destroy her reputation. That's not who I am. I'm not talking about you doing anything, Emma said quietly. I'm talking about me. The way she said it made me look at her more carefully. There was something different in her expression, kind of resolve that reminded me she wasn't just the sweet, idealistic girl everyone assumed her to be. Social workers saw the worst of human nature regularly, and they learned to fight for the people they protected. Emma, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that maybe it's time someone reminded Jessica that actions have consequences, and that family loyalty works both ways. She leaned forward, her eyes never leaving mine. I'm thinking that maybe I'm tired of watching her treat good people like disposable assets. I can't ask you to get involved in this. Yeah, she's your sister. She's my sister who's trying to destroy a good man and his family for profit, Emma said firmly. That doesn't sit well with me, Ryan. Not at all. We talked until nearly 3 a.m, not about strategies or plans, but about values and loyalty and what it meant to stand up for the people you cared about. Emma told me stories about her work, about families she'd helped save from terrible situations, about the satisfaction that came from making a real difference in people's lives even when nobody noticed or thanked you for it. You know what I realized tonight? She said as I was getting ready to leave. Jessica and I grew up in the same house, with the same parents. But we learned completely different lessons about what matters in life. She learned that success means accumulating wealth and power. I learned that success means using whatever gifts you have to make other people's lives better. Standing at her door, I felt something shift inside me. For months, I'd been beaten down by Jessica's constant criticism. It's made to feel like my values were naive and my priorities were wrong. But Emma saw strength where Jessica had seen weakness, purpose where Jessica had seen failure. Thank you, I said, for listening, for caring, for reminding me that not everyone measures worth in dollar signs. Emma smiled, and for a moment, I forgot that she was my ex-wife's sister. I forgot about divorce papers and legal battles and failing businesses. I had just seen a woman who genuinely amazed me, someone who had devoted her life to helping others and somehow held on to her compassion despite witnessing the worst in people. She made me feel like maybe I wasn't as lost as I'd thought. Get some rest, Ryan, she said gently. Tomorrow we fight back. 3 days later, Emma's plan began to unfold in a way I never could have predicted. I was on site at the Henderson project, trying to salvage what we could, when my phone buzzed. A message from Tyler. Dude, turn on Channel 7. Something huge is going down at peak marketing. I ducked into the closest coffee shop with a TV and watched, stunned, as a news reporter stood outside Jessica's office building. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Marketing executive investigated for misuse of client funds. The reporter was saying, sources close to Peak Marketing Solutions confirmed that the state attorney general is investigating possible misappropriation of client money by senior executives, involving questionable partnerships with affiliated companies. My phone rang instantly. Jessica. She didn't bother with a greeting. Ryan, I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, but you need to stop this now, she snapped. This investigation could destroy everything I've worked for. I was genuinely clueless. What investigation? Don't play dumb, she spat. Someone leaked info about Marcus's consulting contracts, claiming conflicts of interest. And conveniently, this all starts right after we begin our divorce proceedings. I didn't know what to say. Hadn't done anything. But I wasn't about to let her know that. Maybe if you'd been more focused on your business and less on trying to bleed me dry, you wouldn't be in this mess. This is sabotage. I know it's coming from you or someone you hired. Marcus's contracts are clean. This'll all come out. But meanwhile, we've had to halt our expansion. Our clients are panicking. When the call ended, I just sat there reeling. Someone had clearly dug into Jessica and Marcus's shady dealings and found something real, serious enough to get the authorities involved. Later that evening, Emma asked me to meet her for dinner at a quiet spot near campus. She was all ready, seated when I arrived, looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. I saw the news about peak marketing, I said, sliding into the booth. Any idea what's going on? She sipped her wine. Might have a little insight. There was something in her voice that made me study her face more closely. Emma, what did you do? She looked me in the eye. What anyone should do when they suspect something illegal. I reported it. What exactly did you report? She took out her phone and handed it to me, displaying screenshots. Remember when I house sat for Jessica last year? She never changed her email password. I still had access. My heart skipped. You've been reading her emails? Only the business ones, and only after she tried to destroy your family's business. Ryan, what I found is more than unethical. It's criminal. The emails outlined a kickback scheme. Peak Marketing would push clients toward Marcus's firm, which would then subcontract work back to Peak at inflated prices. Clients thought they were hiring independent consultants, but the firms were secretly colluding. They were billing for the same services twice. This is fraud, I said, stunned. It's been going on for years, Emma added. They've raked in hundreds of thousands by scamming their clients. I stared at her. But how did you even think to look? She gave a small, bitter smile. I know my sister. Always been willing to cut corners when she thought no one was watching. Remember in high school? She made me write her essays so she could focus on student council? This is just a more lucrative version of that. This could send her to prison. And it might, Emma said. But it also gives her a reason to settle the divorce fast and quietly. She can't afford more attention on her finances. I blinked. You told her? I sent a message through our mom, said Jessica might want to reconsider her financial demands before things get worse. I didn't give details, but I said her business choices could reflect poorly on the family. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Bring your lawyer. Emma saw the message and nodded. She's ready to deal. I looked at her across the table, overwhelmed. She had risked everything, including her relationship. With her sister, to protect my family. I don't know how to thank you, I said. You don't need to thank me, she replied. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't let this ruin your faith in love or people. Jessica hurt you, yes, but she's not the measure of every relationship. Don't let her steal more from you than she already has. Looking into her eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for saving my family's business, but maybe for something more, something real. There's something else I've been meaning to say, Emma said softly, this past few weeks. Seeing how you've handled all this with strength and integrity, it's made me realize something. What's that? I've realized that I've had feelings for you for a very long time. It's probably since high school, if I'm being honest. I never said anything because you were with Jessica and then you married her, and I convinced myself it was. Just a silly crush that would fade. My heart stopped. Emma had feelings for me. Emma, who was everything Jessica wasn't. Genuine, compassionate, selfless, brave enough to risk everything to protect the people she loved. Emma, I started, but she held up her hand. I'm not telling you this to complicate things or to pressure. I know you're going through a divorce and probably not ready for anything new. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, when you've healed from what Jessica did to you, I'd like the chance to show you what a real partnership looks like. Across the table from me sat a woman who just risked her relationship with her family to save mine, who'd seen me at my lowest point and somehow found me worth fighting for, who embodied every quality I'd thought I wanted in Jessica, but had never actually found. Emma, I said, reaching across the table to take her hand, I think I've been looking for you my whole life. Just didn't realize it until now. The meeting at Sarah Chen's office the next afternoon was unlike anything I'd expected. Jessica arrived looking haggard, her usual polished appearance replaced by dark circles under her eyes and hair that hadn't been styled with her typical precision. Marcus wasn't with her, which spoke volumes about how quickly their partnership had soured under federal scrutiny. "Let's cut to the chase," Jessica's attorney said before anyone had even sat down. "My client is prepared to withdraw her claims against Mitchell & Sons Construction in exchange for a clean break on all other marital assets." Sarah looked at me with raised eyebrows. This was exactly what we'd hoped for but hadn't dared expect. "And what does Mrs. Mitchell want in return for this concession?" "Discretion," Jessica said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the room. "No public statements about our marriage or divorce, no interviews, no social media posts. Complete silence about our personal business." I studied Jessica's face, seeing desperation where I'd once seen confidence. The federal investigation had clearly rattled her more than she'd expected. And the last thing she needed was additional negative publicity from a bitter divorce proceeding. "That's acceptable," I said simply. "I've never wanted to air our private issues publicly anyway." Jessica's shoulders sagged with relief. "There's one more thing. I need you to know that Emma had nothing to do with the investigation. The authorities contacted me because someone filed an anonymous complaint, but it wasn't family-related." I almost smiled at Jessica's attempt to protect her sister, not knowing that Emma was the source of her current troubles. "I understand." Within an hour, we'd signed papers that dissolved our marriage cleanly. Jessica kept her retirement accounts and personal assets. I kept the house and my freedom from her claims against the family business. It was fair in a way our marriage had never been. As we left the lawyer's office, Jessica stopped me in the hallway. "Ryan, I want you to know that I never meant for things to get this ugly. I just thought you'd fight harder for us." "I did fight for us, Jessica. For years. You just weren't fighting alongside me." She nodded sadly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I forgot what we were supposed to be fighting for in the first place." 3 months later, Emma and I were having dinner at my parents' house when the news broke that Marcus had been arrested for fraud and conspiracy charges. Jessica had avoided prosecution by cooperating with the investigation, but her career in marketing was effectively over. According to Tyler, who still had connections in Denver's business community, she'd moved to Phoenix to start fresh in real estate. "Do you ever feel bad about what happened to her?" Emma asked, as we walked through my parents' neighborhood after dinner, holding hands under the streetlights. "I feel bad that she chose a path that led to destruction," I said honestly. "I don't feel responsible for the consequences of her choices anymore. Emma had become a constant presence in my life, and my family had embraced her immediately. Dad appreciated her genuine interest in the construction business and her practical suggestions for expanding our community outreach programs. Mom loved having someone who actually wanted to help in the kitchen and remembered details about people's lives. They both treated Emma like the daughter they'd never had, but always wanted. "I have something to tell you," Emma said, stopping under a maple tree that was beginning to show fall colors. "I got offered a promotion at work, Director of Family Services for the entire county." "Emma, that's incredible. You'd be helping thousands of families instead of dozens. It would mean better pay, more influence, the ability to implement programs I've been dreaming about for years." She paused, looking uncertain. "But it would also mean longer hours and more responsibility. I wanted to make sure you're okay with that before I accept." I turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in mine. "Emma, I fell in love with your passion for helping people. I would never ask you to limit that for my sake. Take the promotion, build the programs, change the world. I'll be right here supporting you every step of the way." Her smile could have powered the entire neighborhood. "I love you, Ryan Mitchell." "I love you too, Emma. More than I ever thought possible." Well, 2 years later, I proposed to Emma at the Rocky Mountain Community Center where we'd reconnected. Surrounded by the teenagers from our classes and the families we'd both worked to help, she said yes through tears of joy, and the kids cheered like they'd personally orchestrated our romance. Our wedding was everything my marriage to Jessica had never been: genuine, joyful, filled with people who truly cared about our happiness, rather than appearances or social status. Dad walked Emma down the aisle since her own father had passed away the previous winter, and Mom cried happy tears throughout the entire ceremony. Mitchell & Sons construction had not only survived, but thrived under the changes Emma and I implemented together. We'd expanded into green building practices and community development projects, creating jobs while making a positive impact. Emma's county program had become a model for other regions, and she'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country about innovative approaches to family services. Jessica sent a wedding card with no return address, simply signed wishing, "You both happiness." I appreciated the gesture, though Emma and I had long since stopped dwelling on the past. Standing in our backyard 5 years after my divorce, watching Emma plant vegetables in the garden we'd built together, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The woman who'd signed our divorce papers without a thought had inadvertently led me to someone who signed her heart with all her love. Jessica had taught me what I didn't want in a partner. Emma had shown me everything I did. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, brushing dirt from her hands as she stood up from the tomato plants. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that some stories have happy endings." My waist. This isn't an ending, Ryan. This is just the beginning. She was right, as she usually was. We had a lifetime ahead of us, filled with shared dreams, mutual respect, and the kind of love that grows stronger through challenges rather than being destroyed by them. Some people stay stuck in patterns that don't serve them. Others learn, grow, and find their way to something better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. This one hit the mark. You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.